Hi there, Dean Heskin. Thanks for tuning into our podcast, The Secret War on Cash. I have with me my co-host, Chris Agelastos. I think his name actually just flashed here. Chris, how are you? You're
You
looking
got a
very
face to go with the
patriotic
name.
today. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
looking
thank you.
very patriotic. Wow, very
I did that
nice.
just for you.
I
It took me a
appreciate
while to
that.
paint, but it came out nicely.
I only wish that were true. Problem is, I know otherwise.
Yeah,
I know
you and me
you're up
both.
in the northern part of Arizona right now, getting out of this heat, although you did miss a
Yeah,
fantastic storm last night. We had a doozy.
that's what I hear. Yeah, my daughter is there watching the dogs and stuff, and she was kind of concerned for a while.
Oh, it was so you got wind. It started off wind, dust, and then a pretty good downpour of rain. Very humid today, however. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, let's go here. What are we talking about today? Let's start with China. From King World News, China is buying massive amounts of gold and silver and
Hmm.
dumping dollars. This is not really a new thing, but it's becoming, you know, more and more. For whatever reason, it's becoming more and more prevalent in the news.
Hmm.
The big thing being the gold thing. Again, no surprise there. The bigger concern is the fact that they're dumping dollars, and in some cases, dumping dollars to buy gold. And with this being said, they talk about how this is not just the U.S. dollar. That China doesn't have a very favorable outlook really for any fiat money out there, and it really is. As we look at just the title of this article, it's okay, buying gold, dumping dollars, but this is a really kind of a meaty article as it pertains to you know what exactly they're doing, and this is a strategic move, to put it mildly, number one. But number two, with this, I mean, they are making sure that they are not going to be the one left, the last person standing holding fiat money. And that's something that I think the United States of America in particular, we are way behind the curve on.
Yeah, I think they realized that they were too reliant on the U.S. dollar, and I don't think that's necessarily a anti-U.S. thing from their perspective. I think they're just trying to strengthen themselves and be more fiscally responsible. And to do that, they're purchasing tons and tons, literal metric tons of gold and silver, and diversifying away from the dollar. So it says in this article specifically, just about 700 metric tons of monetary gold has been imported through May. So through the first half of this year in 2026, which is a lot. And also silver. They're also diversifying into silver. 1,600 metric tons of silver in just the first quarter of the year, and all while paying for that with assets that used to be U.S. dollars, U.S. treasuries. So they're unloading U.S. treasuries and using that money to buy a physical, tangible asset, and moving towards just a less dollar-dominated financial system for them. And with Hong Kong already being a big financial player in the world, they're really shaping things up to become dominant. Right now, London and New York pretty much are the most dominant gold traders in the world. But Hong Kong, if this activity continues, is going to be right behind us and probably pass us relatively soon. So it's all good for China. Unfortunately, it doesn't help what we're dealing with here in our country with a dwindling dollar.
Right. Well, and kind of on the heels of that, or flipping forward here to our next article on from the Daily Reckoning, they're talking about here. This is Byron King talking about China's touch of death, and
Hmm.
it starts off by talking about like the martial arts part of it and acupuncture, but it's a known term. They call it what was it, dim mak, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
China's touch of death. But as I read through this, and this is, for those tuned in, take the time, to save the link to this article you'll see in our show description, because it's really very telling as to what, is going on in China right now. and the effect that's going to have here in the United States. And when you look at all of the resources that China controls, it's absolutely crazy.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I don't know if this kind of caught you as it did me, Chris, but they talk about how our smartphones contain 63 out of 92 elements in the periodic table. That's crazy.
Yeah.
63 out of 92 of the elements.
Yeah.
But the problem there being is that the majority of those 63 of 92 all come from China. And then you start getting
Right.
into really everything that is produced. The lion's share of whatever elements are being utilized is in fact coming from China. And
Hmm.
right now, the only thing that we're hearing about here in the United States, by and large, in the news on the networks, is just what's going on with oil and what's going on in Iran.
Hmm.
But this is a major thing that's going on here with China. And here's the bigger thing: they're talking about how China, they control global supply chains and things of this nature. But this was a orchestrated plan that China had to put themselves in the position they're in right now that they started 60 years ago.
Yep.
And there are several people, there are economists in the United States who have been following this for decades, for literal decades, and kind of warning about it. And it's only now that it's really starting to get attention because they're kind of on the brink of accomplishing the objective that they set out to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think that's one area where China really dominates and has for a long time is, they're always playing the long-term game. And I think here, not just in the U.S., but even throughout a lot of Europe, we tend to look at, let's make some moves to reposition ourselves over the next 5 or 10 years. Even in investments, we have a very short term outlook, typically speaking, compared to China. I mean, this has been 60 years in the making, and this, along with their dollar strategy, that the de-dollarization strategy we were just discussing, they kind of play hand in hand together. And when I was reading through these rare earth minerals, I mean, a couple of them sounded familiar, tungsten, gallium, but germanium, indium, antimony. I'm like, what are these things even, right? Then as you get into it a little bit more, it explains that all of these rare earth minerals are used in smartphones, like you mentioned, electric vehicles, semiconductors, military hardware, AI systems, robotics, aerospace, and renewable energy. Those are, if you take all of those categories and add them up, I mean, that's the 90% of the direction that the world is heading is in those fields and in those areas. And China controls all of those minerals. And unfortunately, I think here in the U.S. where we hurt ourselves is for decades now, we've been looking at reducing our costs rather than solidifying our position um, in mining and controlling our own future. And so we've outsourced all of this. There was a time when we actually processed a lot of these minerals, and they're starting now in the U.S. to ramp that up a little bit, because they're aware now that there's a problem. But we sort of took our eye off the ball, in my opinion, and really gave China a huge head start here. So the good news is, because I don't want to be all negative, for U.S. companies that are involved in mining and refining and the processing of these types of minerals, they're probably going to grow pretty well over the next decade or so, because the government is going to be dumping more money into those areas to ramp things up here. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's just we're way late to the game, unfortunately.
Well, and I will say though, and again, I would say not doom and gloom necessarily, but as you were mentioning some of those elements that you don't
Hmm.
typically hear much about, you've never, or even maybe you've never even heard of it before. But as you described and explained what they go into, like
Yeah.
smartphones, AI, electric cars, the bottom line is, and the concern is, we rely on China for this,
Yep.
and those areas you mentioned is what we rely that without those areas, our economy really is doing nothing right now. I mean, those are the singular growth areas for the most
Yeah.
part, or I can't say singular, but the limited areas of growth or strength that we have, if any, in our economy right now. So,
Yep.
and I know the argument has always been, well, China depends on us just as much as we depend on them. But couple that with our first article where they're shifting out of fiat money and into gold. Again, they are making strides and efforts to kind of minimize the exposure that they have with the United States, with the dollar and our economy. So
Yep.
this is why, ladies and gentlemen, it's called The Secret War on Cash, this podcast. And also we have our report that is free to you, The Secret War on Cash. You can get that by calling or texting us at 1-800-289-2646, or you can also visit us online, no obligation for it, www.swissamerica.com. Thank you, Chris, and thank you to those of you who are tuned in here today. If you're not subscribed, please do so. We'd love to talk to you more in the future. Other than that, have a great rest of your day.
Take care.